Well, if it isn't another perfectly reasonable day in the galaxy getting absolutely demolished by human intervention. Today's victim of their peculiar brand of organized insanity? The entire Kytharan military hierarchy, courtesy of one Zara Holt, a maintenance engineer, a female human who somehow convinced 5 trained warrior cubs that thinking for themselves might be more interesting than blind obedience. Naturally, this defies approximately 17 different evolutionary theories and at least 4 fundamental laws of pack dynamics. But since when has impossibility ever stopped a human from doing exactly what they want? The Kytharan species, for those unfamiliar, are essentially living weapons wrapped in midnight blue fur with claws that can slice through titanium plating. Their pack structure is absolute, carved into their DNA through millions of years of evolution. The alpha commands, the pack obeys, end of discussion. Questioning the hierarchy results in immediate exile or death. So naturally, a human found a way to break that system. Because of course they did. The setting was Orbital Defense Station Helix 9, a fortress designed to withstand planetary bombardments. Commander Vex 917, a 6-legged insectoid with more battle scars than most veterans twice his age, maintained strict order among the mixed species garrison. The station housed over 2,000 personnel, including a diplomatic exchange program featuring various allied species learning to work together. The Kytharan delegation consisted of Alpha Drex, a massive warrior whose presence could silence an entire room just by entering it, and 5 of his finest cubs, Nyx, Vale, Joss, Kale, and Rin. Each cub stood nearly 2 meters tall, possessed enough muscle mass to bench press a shuttle, and carried enough weaponry to level a city block. Their silver eyes held the cold calculation of born killers. Then there was Zara Holt. Human female, approximately 1.6 meters in height. Possessing the audacity to wear bright yellow maintenance coveralls in a military facility. She worked as a systems engineer, fixing whatever broke down in the station's endless maze of technological nightmares. Completely unremarkable by any measurable standard. The incident began during a routine training exercise in Hangar Bay 7. Alpha Drex had arranged a demonstration of pack coordination for the station's command staff. The Cubs were to execute a complex assault pattern that showcased their species' legendary tactical precision. Cubs, formation, Theta 7, execute. Drex's voice carried the absolute authority of genetic dominance. The 5 warriors immediately dropped into attack positions. Nyx took point, his massive frame coiled like a spring. Vale and Joss flanked left and right, their claws extending with metallic clicks that echoed through the hangar. Kale positioned himself for rear support, while Rin prepared to provide aerial reconnaissance from the elevated platforms. Everything proceeded, according to textbook Kytharan military doctrine, until Zara Holt walked into the hangar carrying a toolkit and looking completely oblivious to the lethal display happening around her. "Oh, sorry. Didn't realize you guys were doing whatever this is." Her voice carried that casual tone humans use when discussing weather patterns. "I just need to recalibrate the gravity generators. Won't take long." Alpha Drex's eyes narrowed to silver slits. "Human. You interrupt sacred combat ritual. Remove yourself immediately." Zara looked around at the 5 cubs frozen in their attack positions, then back at the towering Alpha. Sacred combat ritual? In a maintenance hangar? That's interesting. Mind if I watch? I've never seen Kytharan tactics before. The audacity was breathtaking. A lone human, asking permission to observe classified military procedures. Commander Vex 917, monitoring from the observation deck, later described the moment as watching someone casually pet a live plasma grenade. Drex's fur bristled with barely contained fury. Cubs do not perform for alien entertainment. Begin assault sequence. Here's where things got fascinating. The Cubs remained frozen. Not because they couldn't execute the command, but because they were looking at Zara, waiting, as if seeking some form of approval from a creature their species classified as prey. Guys?" Zara tilted her head with genuine curiosity. "You don't have to do anything dangerous just because someone told you to. That's kind of a weird way to live." Alpha Drex's roar shook dust from the hangar ceiling. Cubs, obey Alpha. This is the way. Execute assault sequence immediately. The cubs shifted uncomfortably. Nyx, the largest, actually took a step backward from his attack position. Vale's claws retracted slightly. Joss began looking between Drex and Zara with obvious confusion. Fascinating, Commander Vex 917 muttered through the comm system. The cubs appear to be experiencing hierarchical conflict. This behavior has never been documented. Zara, completely unaware that she'd just triggered a species-wide crisis of identity, continued working on her gravity generators. She hummed quietly while adjusting calibration settings, occasionally glancing at the cubs with friendly interest. You know, she said conversationally, back on Earth, we had this saying, just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. Seems relevant here. Drex approached Zara with predatory silence, his massive frame casting shadows across her work area. Human female, you corrupt cubs with weakness. This cannot stand. Zara looked up from her equipment, apparently unfazed by 2 meters of apex predator looming over her. Corrupt? I just suggested they think for themselves. That's not corruption. That's evolution. The cubs had completely abandoned their formation now. They formed a loose semicircle around Zara and Drex, their silver eyes tracking every movement. But instead of supporting their alpha, they seemed protective of the human. Cubs! Drex's voice cracked like a whip. Return to formation! This human speaks poison! Nyx, the supposed pack leader among the cubs, stepped forward. When he spoke, his voice carried uncertainty rather than the usual absolute obedience. Alpha, human female asks valid questions. Why attack empty air? What purpose does this serve? The silence that followed could have been measured in geological ages. A Kytharan cub had just questioned the Alpha's wisdom. In their culture, this was equivalent to declaring war on the concept of gravity. Drex's fur stood completely on end now, making his already massive frame appear even more imposing. Nyx, you forget place. Cubs obey, always. This is law of pack. Yeah, but why? Zara's voice cut through the tension like a plasma torch through paper. I mean, what happens if they don't? Does the universe end? Do you all spontaneously combust? Because from where I'm standing, they seem perfectly capable of making their own decisions. Vale, the quieter of the cubs, actually laughed. A sound that had never been heard from a Kytharan warrior in recorded history. Human female makes good point. We think. We choose. Why surrender choice to another? Commander Vex 917's panicked voice crackled through the comm. Medical team to Hangar 7. Possible psychological contamination event? Psychological contamination? Zara looked genuinely confused. I'm just having a conversation. Is that illegal in space? The situation escalated when Drex made the mistake of reaching for Zara with one massive claw. Perhaps he intended to remove her from the equation. Perhaps he planned to demonstrate the consequences of challenging pack authority. We'll never know, because all 5 cubs immediately moved to intercept him. Not to attack their alpha, mind you, but to form a protective barrier around the human who'd asked them to think. Cubs! Drex's voice rose to a howl of rage and confusion. Stand aside! Human must learn proper place in hierarchy. No. Nyx's response was quiet, but absolute. Human shows respect without demanding submission. Human asks questions instead of giving orders. Human treats cubs as individuals, not weapons. The other cubs nodded agreement. Joss stepped closer to Zara's position. We choose human way. Choose thinking over blind obedience. Zara, meanwhile, had returned to her work on the gravity generators, apparently treating the interspecies crisis unfolding around her as background noise. Almost done here, guys. Thanks for the interesting conversation, though. Really makes you think about leadership styles. Alpha Drex stood frozen in disbelief as his entire worldview crumbled around him. The cubs weren't rebelling against authority. They were choosing a different kind of authority, one based on respect rather than fear, guidance rather than domination. This is impossible, he whispered. Cubs follow Alpha, always. This is genetic law. Maybe, Zara said, powering down her equipment. Genetics isn't as rigid as everyone thinks. Maybe choice is stronger than programming. She looked directly at Drex, her human eyes showing no fear of the apex predator. Maybe your cubs are growing up. The cubs arranged themselves around Zara as she prepared to leave the hangar, not as guards or servants, but as friends? Allies? The concept didn't translate well into any existing xenological framework. As they walked toward the exit, Nix paused and looked back at his alpha. We do not abandon pack, Drex. We expand definition of pack. Human shows different path. We choose to walk it. The hangar doors closed behind them, leaving Alpha Drex alone with his shattered assumptions about the natural order of things. Commander Vex 917's voice echoed through the empty space. Computer, log this incident as Code Yellow. Possible paradigm shift in allied species behavior. Recommend immediate consultation with Xenopsychology Department. And that, folks, was just the beginning of Zara Holt's completely unintentional revolution in Kytharan society. Because when humans start asking why, instead of accepting, because I said so, entire civilizations tend to reevaluate their fundamental assumptions about power, authority, and what it really means to lead. The aftermath proved even more entertaining than the initial incident. Within hours, news of the Hangar 7 rebellion had spread throughout the station, like a viral infection. Every species aboard Helix 9 wanted to understand how a human maintenance worker had managed to break thousands of years of genetic programming with casual conversation. Dr. Yenna Cross, the station's chief xenopsychologist, arrived at Zara's quarters with a datapad full of questions and an expression that suggested she'd been drinking too much Stimcaf. Miss Holt, I need to understand exactly what you said to those cubs. Zara looked up from her dinner, a simple meal of synthesized proteins and vegetables that somehow smelled better than the expensive delicacies served in the officer's mess. I didn't say anything special, just ask them why they were doing what they were doing. That's it? Dr. Cross's multiple eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of extreme confusion among her species. You destroyed a fundamental aspect of Kytharan culture by asking why? Well, yeah, seemed like a reasonable question. Zara took another bite of her meal, apparently unaware that she'd just redefined reasonable for an entire galactic sector. They're clearly intelligent beings. Why wouldn't they want to think for themselves? Meanwhile, in the Cubs' quarters, a completely unprecedented scene was unfolding. Nix sat cross-legged on the floor, a position no Kytharan warrior had ever assumed voluntarily. Around him, his packmates engaged in what could only be described as philosophical discussion. Human Zara makes valid point about choice, Vale said, his usual aggressive posture replaced by thoughtful contemplation. Why do we obey without question? What if Alpha is wrong? Joss, who had never spoken more than tactical commands in his entire life, found himself analyzing concepts he'd never considered. Pack strength comes from unity. But what if unity without thought is weakness disguised as strength? Kale and Rin nodded agreement, their silver eyes bright with new ideas. They were experiencing something their species had never allowed: intellectual curiosity about their own society. Alpha Drex, meanwhile, had barricaded himself in his private chambers and was furiously composing reports to the Kytharan High Command. His messages grew increasingly desperate as he tried to explain the inexplicable. Cubs show defiance. Human corruption spreads like plague. Request immediate extraction before contamination becomes permanent. His claws left deep gouges in the metal desk as he typed, frustration evident in every movement. The response from Kytharan Command came swiftly. Negative. Observe and report. Understand nature of human influence. Adapt as necessary. Adapt? Drex stared at the message in disbelief. The High Command wanted him to adapt to human methods? The very concept violated everything he understood about proper pack dynamics. But the Cubs were thriving under this new paradigm. Their combat effectiveness hadn't decreased. If anything, they showed improved tactical thinking. Instead of blindly executing pre-programmed maneuvers, they began creating innovative solutions to complex problems. During their next training session, they demonstrated formations that had never appeared in any Kytharan military manual. They communicated through subtle gestures and shared decisions rather than following a single leader's commands. They had become something unprecedented, a democratic pack. "This is fascinating," Commander Vex 917 observed from the monitoring station. "Their coordination has improved by 37% since the human encounter. They're not just following orders, they're thinking strategically as a unit." The real test came when station engineer Garth Voss, a human male with all the diplomatic sensitivity of a plasma torpedo, decided to confront the Cubs directly. He approached their training area with typical human arrogance and immediately began issuing orders. "U-5! I need heavy lifting in Cargo Bay 12. Move those supply containers, now!" The Cubs stopped their exercises and looked at Voss with expressions that could have frozen supernovas. They'd learned to respect Zara because she treated them as equals. Voss treated them like tools. "We are not your servants, human," Nix replied calmly. "If you require assistance, ask politely. We may choose to help." Voss's face turned several interesting shades of red. "Choose? You're military personnel. You follow orders." "We follow reasonable requests from those who earn our respect," Vale added. "You have earned neither." The confrontation might have escalated, but Zara arrived at that moment drawn by the commotion. She assessed the situation with one glance and immediately understood the problem. "Garth, these aren't dock workers. They're trained warriors who happen to be learning about personal autonomy." She turned to the Cubs with a smile. "Guys, Garth needs help moving some heavy stuff. It's legitimate work that needs doing. Want to lend a hand?" The Cubs immediately agreed. Not because they were ordered to, but because Zara had asked nicely and explained why their help mattered. They followed her toward Cargo Bay 12, leaving Voss standing alone and confused about what had just happened. "How did she do that?" Voss demanded of Commander Vex 917 later. "They refused my direct orders but jumped to help her." "She asked instead of commanded," Vex 917 replied. "She treated them as individuals capable of making decisions. Revolutionary concept, apparently." Alpha Drex watched these interactions from the shadows, his worldview continuing to crumble piece by piece. The Cubs weren't becoming weak under human influence. They were becoming stronger, more capable, more evolved. The realization hit him like a meteor strike. Maybe the humans were right. Maybe blind obedience wasn't strength. Maybe true power came from earning loyalty rather than demanding it. That philosophical breakthrough lasted exactly 18 hours before the galaxy decided to test everyone's new theories about leadership and cooperation. Because apparently, the universe has a twisted sense of humor when it comes to timing. The crisis arrived in the form of a Zirion attack fleet dropping out of hyperspace with enough firepower to turn Helix 9 into cosmic debris. 47 warships, each bristling with weapons designed specifically to penetrate station defenses. The Zirions had been planning this assault for months, expecting to face a standard mixed garrison with predictable tactical responses. They had not planned on encountering a pack of philosophically enlightened Kytharan warriors. "All hands to battle stations." Commander Vex 917's voice echoed through the station as alarm klaxons wailed. "This is not a drill. Prepare for immediate combat." Drex found himself facing the ultimate test of his crumbling worldview. Military protocol demanded he take command of the Cubs, coordinate their response according to established Kytharan doctrine. But the Cubs were already moving, flowing toward their positions with fluid precision while completely ignoring his presence. They weren't disobeying him, they simply weren't looking to him for guidance anymore. "Cubs! Formation Delta 9! Defensive positions!" Drex's voice carried desperation rather than authority. The Cubs paused mid-stride and turned to face their former alpha. But instead of the immediate compliance he expected, they exchanged glances, actually conferring with each other about whether his orders made tactical sense. "Delta 9 is outdated protocol," Nix observed calmly. "Designed for single target engagement. We face multiple vectors of attack. Suggest modified formation incorporating human adaptive strategies," Vale added. "Allow individual initiative within coordinated framework." Drex's jaw hung open. The Cubs were critiquing his tactical decisions, in the middle of a battle alert. Cubs do not question Alpha during combat. We question everything now, Joss replied matter-of-factly. Human Zara teaches this. Better solutions come from thinking, not blind following. The station shuddered as the first Zarion bombardment struck the outer shields. Energy readings spiked beyond safe parameters, while automated systems struggled to compensate. Through the chaos, Zara's voice crackled over the comm system from Engineering Section 12. All combat teams, this is Holt. I'm reading massive power fluctuations in the defensive grid. We need adaptive responses, not textbook maneuvers. Think outside your programming. The Cubs smiled. Actually smiled. In the middle of a potential station-killing attack, they found Zara's casual advice amusing rather than terrifying. See? Kale grinned at Drex, displaying impressive dental weaponry. Human confirms our assessment, adaptation over tradition. What happened next became the stuff of military legend. The Cubs spread throughout the station, not according to any established formation, but based on real-time assessment of where they could be most effective. They communicated through rapid clicks and gestures, sharing information instantly while adapting to changing battlefield conditions. Rin positioned himself in the sensor array, using his enhanced hearing to track Zarian movement patterns. His reports guided defensive calculations with precision no computer could match. Nix and Joss took point positions near potential breach zones, but instead of waiting for orders, they began setting up adaptive defensive networks. They created overlapping fields of fire that could be modified instantly based on actual attack vectors rather than predicted ones. Vale and Kale coordinated with human engineering teams, their natural strength combined with human ingenuity, to reinforce critical systems in ways that violated every safety manual but proved brilliantly effective. This is unprecedented, Dr. Cross observed from the command center. They're operating as autonomous agents within a coordinated strategy. It's like watching individual cells function as a unified organism. Commander Vex 917 monitored the battle through multiple screens, his compound eyes tracking dozens of variables simultaneously. Their effectiveness has increased exponentially. They're not just following orders, they're creating solutions. The Zarian fleet pressed their attack, confident that traditional station defenses would crumble under sustained bombardment. Their tactical computers had calculated victory probabilities based on standard military responses. They had not factored in the possibility of defenders who thought creatively, under pressure. When the first wave of Zarion boarding pods penetrated the outer hull, they expected to face panicked defenders following predictable protocols. Instead, they encountered something completely outside their experience: organized chaos guided by adaptive intelligence. The Cubs engaged the invaders with a combination of traditional Kytharan ferocity and newly learned human flexibility. They didn't simply attack. They analyzed, adapted, and responded with surgical precision. Target their power cores, not their weapons. Nix's voice carried across the combat zone. Human maintenance protocols identify vulnerable systems. The boarding parties found themselves facing defenders who modified their tactics in real time, who shared information instantly, who treated each engagement as a learning experience rather than a simple fight. Drex watched from his command post as his former Cubs revolutionized combat doctrine through applied common sense. They weren't stronger or faster than before. They were smarter. They were thinking. The breaking point came when a massive Zarian dreadnought broke through the outer defensive perimeter, its main guns charging for a station-killing strike. Standard protocol called for evacuation and surrender. The mathematical probability of survival dropped to virtually zero. Zara's voice cut through the despair with characteristic human audacity. All teams, this is engineering. I've got a crazy idea that might work. Anyone interested in doing something impossible? The Cubs responded instantly. We listen, human Zara. The Dreadnought's main gun requires 43 seconds to charge. If we can synchronize a coordinated strike on their power distribution nodes at exactly the right moment, we can cause a feedback cascade that'll cripple their entire ship. Impossible, Commander Vex 917 muttered. The timing would have to be perfect, millisecond precision across multiple teams. We can do this. Nix's voice carried absolute confidence. Pack coordination with individual initiative. human concept applied to Kytharan abilities. What followed was the most beautiful display of organized mayhem I've ever witnessed. The Cubs coordinated with engineering teams, fighter squadrons, and defensive platforms to execute a plan that required perfect timing and complete trust in each other's abilities. They didn't wait for official orders. They didn't check with higher authority. They simply acted, each contributing their unique capabilities to a solution that existed only because they'd learned to think beyond traditional limitations. 38 seconds. The Cubs struck power nodes with surgical precision. 39 seconds. Human engineering teams overloaded specific conduit networks. 40 seconds. Fighter squadrons targeted backup power coupling. 41 seconds. Defensive platforms focused fire on energy routing systems. 42 seconds. Everything went according to Zara's impossible plan. 43 seconds. The Zerion Dreadnought's main gun exploded spectacularly, taking half their ship with it. The remaining Zerion fleet, faced with defenders who operated outside all known tactical parameters, chose discretion over valor and retreated to hyperspace. Station Helix 9 had survived an impossible battle through the simple revolutionary concept of treating intelligent beings as capable of intelligent decisions. Alpha Drex found himself standing alone in his command post, watching celebration scenes throughout the station. Cubs and humans worked together, sharing victory with genuine mutual respect. They had created something unprecedented, a new form of military organization based on earned trust rather than imposed hierarchy. "Computer, open channel to Kytharan High Command," Drex said quietly. "Channel open, Alpha." "Command, this is Drex. Reporting successful defense of Station Helix 9 through implementation of human organizational concepts. Cubs demonstrate superior combat effectiveness under collaborative leadership model. Request permission to learn from human methods." The response came swiftly. "Permission granted. Adapt as necessary. The pack evolves." Later, as damage repair teams worked throughout the station, Zara found herself in the Cubs' quarters, sharing a meal with warriors who had redefined what it meant to be strong. "So," she said conversationally, "how does it feel to think for yourselves?" "Terrifying," Nix admitted with a grin. "Also exhilarating. Also, right. This feels right. We are still pack," Vale added. "But now we choose our pack. Choose our purpose. Choose how to be strong." Drex appeared in the doorway, his massive frame somehow seeming smaller than before. Not weaker, but less rigid. More flexible. "Human Zara," he said formally. "I request instruction in your leadership methods." Zara looked up from her meal with that familiar expression of casual confidence. "Leadership? I don't lead anyone. I just ask questions and trust people to find their own answers." This is leadership, Drex realized. True leadership. Not commanding obedience, but inspiring excellence. And that's how a human maintenance engineer accidentally revolutionized military doctrine across 3 sectors by treating intelligent beings like they were actually intelligent. The Cubs never did return to blind obedience. They chose something better. The terrifying, exhilarating responsibility of thinking for themselves while working together toward common goals. The ripple effects of Zara's unintentional revolution proved more far-reaching than anyone anticipated. Within weeks, delegations from 17 different species arrived at Helix 9, all demanding to understand how humans had managed to improve Kytharan combat effectiveness by 47% through casual conversation. Ambassador Thex Nin of the Crystalline Hegemony proved particularly skeptical. Her species had perfected hierarchical control through millions of years of evolution, creating societies where individual thought was considered a dangerous aberration. "This human method is chaos," she declared to Commander Vex 917 during an official inquiry. "Order requires absolute structure. How do you maintain discipline when subordinates question authority?" "Perhaps," Vex 917 replied diplomatically. "The question should be, how do you maintain progress when authority discourages questions?" The Cubs had become inadvertent celebrities, demonstrating their new tactical approaches for visiting military observers. Each demonstration reinforced the same revolutionary concept: thinking beings working together by choice achieved superior results compared to programmed responses. Captain Knox Willis, a human military strategist from the core worlds, arrived expecting to find his species' methods validated through alien adoption. Instead, he discovered something that challenged his own assumptions about command structure. "This isn't how we do things in the fleet," Willis observed, after watching the Cubs coordinate a defensive scenario without any centralized command. "We have clear chains of authority for good reasons." "What reasons?" Nix asked with genuine curiosity. "Does your chain of authority improve decision-making speed? Does it increase combat effectiveness? Or does it simply make commanders feel important?" Willis found himself unable to answer satisfactorily. The Cubs had learned to ask the most dangerous question in any organization. What's the actual purpose of this rule? Meanwhile, Zara continued her normal duties, apparently oblivious to the philosophical earthquake she triggered. She fixed broken systems, maintained equipment, and treated everyone with the same casual respect that had started this entire revolution. "Miss Holt," Dr. Cross approached with another datapad full of questions. "The Kytharan High Command has formally requested that you establish a training program for other packs throughout their territory." Zara looked up from a stubborn atmospheric processor, grease smearing one cheek. "Training program? For what? I just ask people why they're doing things and listen to their answers." "Exactly." Dr. Cross's excitement caused her multiple eyes to blink rapidly. "You've developed a methodology for organizational transformation that could revolutionize military structures across the galaxy. I fixed some hurt feelings and encouraged critical thinking. That's not a methodology, that's just being decent to people." The conversation was interrupted by alarms signaling another crisis. Not an attack this time, but something potentially more dangerous. A diplomatic incident involving 3 species who had been enemies for centuries. The Mordian Empire, the Skull Republic, and the Nexus Coalition had all sent representatives to observe Kytharan tactical innovations. Unfortunately, confining hereditary enemies in the same space station proved predictably explosive. "They're going to start shooting each other in our conference room," Commander Vex 917 reported grimly. 17 generations of warfare don't disappear just because they're interested in military theory. Traditional diplomatic protocols called for separating the factions, scheduling individual meetings, and hoping nobody declared war in the meantime. Standard procedure, guaranteed to accomplish nothing while maintaining the status quo. Zara had a different approach. She walked into the conference room where representatives from 3 hostile civilizations sat on opposite sides of the table, radiating mutual hatred with impressive intensity. "Hi everyone," she said cheerfully, settling into a chair with her usual casual confidence. "I understand you all want to kill each other. That's interesting. Mind if I ask why?" The question landed like a plasma grenade in a munitions depot. Ambassador Krelvex of the Mordians sputtered indignantly. "Human female, the Skull Republic massacred our colonies. Blood debts must be paid." "The Mordians enslaved our population centers." General Zareth of the Skull Republic slammed one armored fist on the table. "Justice demands retribution. Both factions violated Nexus territory." Coalition Speaker Trenval added with equal fury. "Our sovereignty was ignored." "Okay," Zara nodded thoughtfully. "So you all hurt each other, and you're all angry about it. That makes sense. But here's what I don't understand. How does continuing to hurt each other fix anything?" The silence that followed could have powered a fusion reactor. 3 species who had built entire civilizations around the concept of eternal warfare suddenly found themselves asked to justify the actual purpose of their conflicts. "It is tradition," Ambassador Krelvex finally managed. "Honor demands—" General Zareth began, then faltered. "We have always—" Coalition Speaker Trenval trailed off uncertainly. "Right," Zara said gently. "But what do you actually want? Not what your ancestors wanted or what tradition says you should want. What do you personally hope to achieve?" The Cubs, who had been observing from the corner, exchanged knowing glances. They recognized the method now. Zara wasn't trying to solve the diplomatic crisis. She was encouraging the participants to think about whether they actually wanted to continue having a crisis. "We want—" Ambassador Krelvex paused, apparently considering the question seriously for the first time in his career. "We want our people to be safe." to prosper. Same goal, General Zareth admitted reluctantly. Skull Republic seeks security for citizens. Coalition desires peaceful development, Speaker Trenval added. Growth without interference. Interesting, Zara observed. You all want basically the same things. Safety, prosperity, growth. So why are you fighting instead of cooperating? What happened next violated every principle of interstellar diplomacy. 3 hereditary enemies began actually talking to each other about practical solutions to mutual problems. They discovered shared concerns about piracy, resource allocation, and technological development. This is impossible, Doctor. Cross whispered to Commander Vex 917. They're negotiating actual cooperation agreements in a single session. Human methodology, Vex 917 replied. Treat everyone like rational beings capable of making reasonable decisions. By the end of the meeting, the 3 factions had established preliminary frameworks for trade agreements, mutual defense pacts, and joint research initiatives. Not because anyone had forced them to cooperate, but because they'd finally asked themselves whether warfare actually served their real goals. The Cubs watched with obvious pride as their human friend casually revolutionized interstellar relations through applied common sense. Human Zara transforms enemies into allies, Nix observed with admiration. Same method that transformed Cubs into thinking beings. Not transformation, Zara corrected gently. Just permission. Permission to think, choose, grow, change. Everyone has that potential. Most just need someone to remind them it's allowed. The Zerian fleet learned never to attack stations defended by beings who had discovered the difference between following orders and choosing to cooperate. As for Zara Holt, she went back to fixing broken systems, apparently unaware that she'd fixed something much more important. The broken assumption that strength comes from submission rather than from the courage to think, choose, and grow. But the galaxy wasn't finished with her yet. 6 months later, emergency transmissions flooded communication networks across 17 sectors. The Void Hunters had emerged from deep space, an ancient species that had perfected the art of consuming entire civilizations. Their technology was beyond anything known, their tactics incomprehensible, their hunger absolute. Traditional military responses had failed catastrophically. The Mordian Empire's finest fleets were reduced to scrap metal. The Skull Republic's legendary warriors vanished without trace. The Nexus Coalition's advanced defenses crumbled like paper. But then something unprecedented happened. The Cubs, now fully grown and leading their own packs, sent a single message that spread throughout the galaxy. We know human way. We teach others. Together, we choose to survive. The final battle wasn't won through superior firepower or advanced technology. It was won by an alliance of thinking beings who had learned to ask better questions, make better choices, and trust each other enough to forge solutions that no single species could imagine alone. When the Void Hunters finally retreated back to whatever darkness spawned them, they left behind a galaxy forever changed. Not conquered, but transformed. Species who had spent millennia fighting each other discovered they were stronger when they chose cooperation over conflict. And at the center of it all, a human. Maintenance engineer continued fixing broken things, one conversation at a time, proving that the most powerful force in the universe isn't superior technology or ancient wisdom. It's the simple, revolutionary act of treating every thinking being like they're actually capable of thinking. Ridiculous? Absolutely. Revolutionary? Without question. The galaxy would never be the same again.